My father sent anonymous threats to my wife to break us up. I knew something was wrong the moment I walked into our kitchen and saw Sarah sitting at the counter, her hands trembling as she held another manila envelope. It was 7:23 a.m. on a Tuesday in March, and this was the fourth anonymous letter she'd received in 2 months. They know where I work, she whispered, not looking up at me. They know I take yoga classes on Thursdays. They know about the scar on my shoulder from when I was 8. My wife of 3 years had been getting increasingly paranoid, jumping at every sound, checking locks twice, asking me to walk her to her car. I'd been chalking it up to work stress, maybe some weird coincidence with a few crank letters. But the look of genuine terror in her brown eyes that morning made my stomach drop. What does this one say? I asked, sitting down beside her. Sarah slid the letter across the granite countertop. The paper was expensive, cream-colored, heavy stock. The kind my father used for his law firm's letterhead. But I pushed that thought away immediately. That was impossible. Asterisk, Sarah, you're not safe with him. His family has a history you don't know about. Violence runs in their blood. The Hendersons have hurt people before, and you're next. Save yourself while you still can. Someone who cares, asterisk. This is insane, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Sarah, you know this is complete bullshit, right? We don't have any history of violence. These are just some sick pranks. But even as I said it, something nagged at me. The writing style was formal, almost legal in its precision. The paper quality. The fact that whoever was sending these seemed to know intimate details about Sarah's life, her routines, things that would require serious surveillance. There's more, Sarah said quietly. She pulled out her phone and showed me an email that had come in at 3:17 a.m. Look at the email address. The sender was protexaram2024@gmail.com. The email contained a photo of Sarah leaving her office building yesterday, circled in red marker, with a timestamp showing 5:45 p.m., the exact time she always left work. Jesus Christ, I breathed. Sarah, we need to call the police. This is stalking. I already did, she said. Detective Morrison is coming by at 9. But Marcus. She turned to face me fully, and I could see she'd been crying. What if they're right? What if there's something about your family I don't know? The question hit me like a physical blow. Sarah and I had been together for 5 years, married for 3. We'd built our relationship on complete honesty and trust. The fact that some anonymous psychopath was making her doubt everything we had made rage build in my chest. There's nothing, I said firmly. Sarah, look at me. There is nothing violent or dangerous about my family. We're boring middle-class people. My dad's a corporate lawyer who collects model trains. My mom volunteers at the library. The most exciting thing that's ever happened to us was when Uncle Jim got arrested for a DUI in 2019. Sarah nodded, but I could see the doubt still lingering in her eyes. Whoever was doing this knew exactly what they were doing, slowly poisoning her sense of safety, making her question everything about our marriage. I had no idea that I was looking at my father's handiwork. Or that this was just the beginning of a campaign that would nearly destroy everything I loved. Detective Morrison arrived at exactly 9 a.m., a thin woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and graying hair pulled back in a tight bun. She spread the 4 letters and printed emails across our dining room table like evidence in a crime scene, which I suppose they were. The good news is, whoever's doing this is organized but sloppy, she said, pulling on latex gloves to handle the papers. Expensive paper, professional printing, but they've left us plenty to work with. We'll dust for prints, trace the email accounts, and check security cameras around your workplace and gym. Sarah sat rigid beside me, her coffee growing cold. What about the photos? They've been following me for weeks, maybe months. We'll canvass the area, see if anyone's noticed suspicious vehicles or individuals. Mrs. Henderson, I want you to document everything, every email, every time you feel like you're being watched, any changes to your routine. Keep a log. Detective Morrison turned to me. Mr. Henderson, can you think of anyone who might want to harm your wife or break up your marriage? Ex-boyfriends, workplace conflicts, family disputes. No one, I said immediately. Sarah's the most beloved person at her marketing firm. Her ex-boyfriend Jake moved to Portland 3 years ago and sends us Christmas cards. And our families. I paused, thinking. Well, my family loves her. Sarah's parents are in Atlanta, but they adore me. That wasn't entirely true, and I could see Sarah shift slightly beside me. My father had been notably cool toward Sarah since we'd started dating. Not openly hostile, just distant. Formal. He'd skip family dinners when she was there, make pointed comments about rushed marriages and different backgrounds. My mother always made excuses. He was busy with work, stressed about a big case, tired. But this couldn't be connected to that. My father was Marcus Henderson Sr., senior partner at Henderson, Pike & Associates. He'd built his reputation over 30 years of corporate law, served on the hospital board, donated to 3 different charities. The idea that he'd be involved in anonymous stalking was absurd. We'll need a list of everyone who might have access to Mrs. Henderson's personal information, Detective Morrison continued. Co-workers, gym staff, neighbors, family members, service providers. Anyone who'd know her schedule and personal details. After she left, Sarah and I sat in silence for a long time. Finally, she spoke. Your father has never liked me. The words hung in the air like an accusation. I wanted to deny it, but we both knew it was true. Sarah, that doesn't mean. I'm not saying it's him, she said quickly. But Marcus, he's never even tried to get to know me. 5 years, and he still calls me Sarah like it tastes bad in his mouth. He didn't want you to marry me. I thought about our wedding day, how my father had arrived late to the ceremony, left early from the reception. How he'd given a toast that managed to congratulate me without mentioning Sarah's name once. How my mother had apologized afterward, saying he was adjusting to changes. He's just old-fashioned, I said weakly. I'm black, Marcus. Let's not pretend that's not part of this. She was right, and we both knew it. My father had grown up in a different era, had made comments over the years that he called old-fashioned, but that really meant something uglier. But harassment? Stalking? This level of psychological warfare. Even if he doesn't approve, I said, he wouldn't do this. He's a lawyer, Sarah. He knows this is illegal. But even as I said it, a cold certainty was beginning to settle in my stomach. Because my father wasn't just any lawyer, he was the kind who always found ways to get what he wanted, no matter what it took. The breakthrough came 3 weeks later, on a Thursday evening when Sarah was at her yoga class, the one she'd almost quit because someone knew about it. I was home alone, nursing a beer and trying to focus on a client presentation, when my phone rang. Marcus Henderson. The voice was unfamiliar, gravelly, like someone who smoked too much. Yes. My name is Tony Reeves. I'm a private investigator. I think we need to talk about your wife. My blood went cold. What about my wife? Not over the phone. Can you meet me at Denny's on Route 47 in an hour? Come alone. Every instinct told me to hang up, but something in his tone made me grab my keys instead. The drive to Denny's felt surreal, like I was starring in someone else's nightmare. I found Tony Reeves in a back booth, mid-50s, weathered face, wearing a wrinkled suit that had seen better days. He had a manila folder in front of him that made my stomach churn. You're probably wondering why some PI is calling you about your wife, he said as I slid into the booth across from him. The thought crossed my mind. Tony lit a cigarette, ignoring the no-smoking sign. I've been watching her for 14 months. Taking photos, documenting her routine, digging into her background. Someone's been paying me $5,000 a month to build a comprehensive file on Sarah Martinez Henderson. The world tilted sideways. What? Banking records, employment history, medical records, college transcripts, old boyfriends, family drama. Even found out about that scar on her shoulder, playground accident when she was 8, 12 stitches. Tony took a long drag. Real thorough job. My mouth had gone completely dry. Who hired you? That's where things get complicated. Tony opened the folder and pulled out a check stub. Payment comes through an LLC called Westfield Holdings. But I do my research on clients too, Mr. Henderson. Westfield Holdings was incorporated 18 months ago by the law firm Henderson, Pike & Associates. The floor seemed to drop out from under me. No. Your father's been paying me to investigate your wife since January 2023. Long before those letters started showing up. Tony's expression was almost sympathetic. Look, I've done divorce work, cheating spouse investigations, background checks for custody battles. This felt different from the start. Different how? He wasn't looking for evidence of wrongdoing. He wanted leverage. Vulnerabilities. Things that could be used to pressure her. Tony pulled out several photographs of Sarah, leaving work, at the grocery store, talking with friends. When he started asking me to document her exact routines, her fears, her insecurities, that's when I knew this wasn't standard legal work. I stared at a photo of Sarah laughing with her coworker Janet outside a coffee shop, completely unaware she was being watched. The violation of it made me physically sick. Why are you telling me this? Tony stubbed out his cigarette. 2 weeks ago, your father asked me to find someone who could escalate the pressure on your wife. When I asked what that meant, he said Sarah needed to understand she wasn't safe in this marriage. That's when I realized those anonymous letters weren't random. He's been threatening her. More than that. He hired someone else after I refused to escalate. Someone who doesn't have my ethical boundaries. Tony's voice was grim. Mr. Henderson, your father isn't just trying to break up your marriage. He's trying to psychologically destroy your wife to do it. I sat there in that fluorescent-lit Denny's booth, staring at evidence that my father, the man who taught me to ride a bike, who'd helped me study for the bar exam, who still sent me articles he thought I'd find interesting, had spent over a year systematically terrorizing the woman I loved. The worst part was, it was working. The next morning, I called in sick to work and drove to my father's office. Henderson, Pike & Associates occupied the entire 15th floor of the Meridian building downtown, glass walls, mahogany furniture, and the kind of quiet power that comes with billing $800 an hour. The receptionist, Mrs. Chen, had known me since I was 12. Marcus. What a lovely surprise. Your father's in depositions until 11, but... I'll wait, I said, settling into one of the leather chairs in his private waiting area. When he finally emerged at 11:47 a.m., my father looked exactly like what he was, a successful attorney in a $3,000 suit who controlled every room he entered. Marcus Henderson Sr. was 62, silver-haired, with a kind of commanding presence that made judges listen and juries believe. Seeing him now, knowing what I knew, made my skin crawl. Son. This is unexpected. He clapped me on the shoulder like he hadn't spent 14 months orchestrating psychological warfare against my wife. Everything all right? We need to talk. Privately. His office was a monument to his success, diplomas from Harvard Law, photos with judges and politicians, awards from the State Bar Association. I'd always been proud to be his son. Now I wondered how many other people he destroyed with such methodical precision. Sit. He settled behind his massive desk. You look troubled. Work stress. Tell me about Westfield Holdings. The change in his expression was almost imperceptible, a slight tightening around his eyes, a pause that lasted maybe half a second too long. But I'd grown up watching him in courtrooms. I knew his tells. It's a corporate entity we use for certain client investments. Why? Because Westfield Holdings has been paying a private investigator named Tony Reeves $5,000 a month to stalk my wife. My father's face went completely blank, the same expression I'd seen him wear when opposing counsel presented damaging evidence. He leaned back in his chair, steepled his fingers, and studied me like I was a hostile witness. That's quite an accusation, Marcus. It's not an accusation. It's a fact. I pulled out my phone and showed him a photo Tony had given me, a deposit slip from Westfield Holdings to Reeves Investigations, dated February 15th, 14 months, Dad. You've been having her followed for 14 months. The silence stretched between us for what felt like an hour. Finally, my father sighed and opened his desk drawer. He pulled out a thick file folder labeled S. Martinez, Background Investigation, and set it on the desk between us. I was protecting you. The casualness of his admission hit me like a physical blow. No denial, no attempt to explain it away. Just cold acknowledgement. Protecting me from what? My wife. From making the biggest mistake of your life. He opened the file, revealing photos, documents, and detailed reports about Sarah's entire existence. Do you know she had a gambling problem in college? Lost $3,000 playing online poker her sophomore year. She was 19. Her credit score was 542 when you started dating. She had a brief relationship with a married man when she was 24. Her mother was arrested for shoplifting in 2018. He rattled off each item like he was reading charges to a jury. You married a woman you barely knew, Marcus. I've known Sarah for 5 years. You've known the version of herself she wanted you to see. His voice was maddeningly calm. I hired Reeves to conduct a thorough background investigation before you got married. What I found concerned me. So you decided to terrorize her with anonymous threats. My father closed the file and looked at me with something almost resembling disappointment. I tried reasoning with you. I tried subtle intervention. When those failed, more direct measures became necessary. The word measures made my blood run cold. This wasn't my father having a moment of weakness or prejudice. This was calculated, systematic, and ongoing. The letters, Dad. The emails. You've been making her think someone wants to hurt her. Someone does want to hurt her, Marcus. Me. The words hung in the air between us like a death sentence. My father had just admitted, with the same tone he'd used to discuss quarterly earnings, that he was actively trying to destroy my wife's mental health. You're sick, I whispered. I'm practical. He leaned forward, his voice taking on the persuasive tone that had won him countless cases. Marcus, this woman has already changed you. You used to call me twice a week. Now I'm lucky if I hear from you twice a month. You turned down the junior partnership at Kellerman and Associates because she wanted to stay in this city. You're living in a starter home instead of the brownstone on Elm Street because she thought it was too pretentious. Those were my choices. Influenced by her. His fist came down on the desk, the first crack in his composed facade. My son, who graduated summa cum laude from Northwestern Law, who could have his pick of positions at any firm in the country, is working at a mid-tier practice because his wife doesn't want to relocate. She's systematically isolating you from your family, your opportunities, your future. She's done nothing but try to fit into this family. You're the one who's been cold to her from day one. My father stood up and walked to his window, looking out over the city skyline. Do you remember what I told you when you were 16 and dating that girl? What was her name? Jessica. What does that have to do with anything? I told you that the person you marry shapes the trajectory of your entire life. Their ambitions become your limitations. Their problems become your problems. Their family becomes your family. He turned back to face me. Sarah Martinez comes from a world of financial instability, emotional dysfunction, and limited aspirations. Is that the foundation you want for your children? The casual racism beneath his words made my stomach turn. Her name is Sarah Henderson now. She's been part of this family for 3 years. Has she? His eyebrows rose slightly. Tell me, son, how often does she attend family gatherings? How many times has she initiated contact with your mother or me? When your Uncle Robert was in the hospital last month, did she visit? Send flowers? Even ask about his condition? Each question felt like a scalpel, designed to cut at doubts I didn't even know I had. The horrible thing was, he wasn't entirely wrong about the facts. Sarah had been pulling away from my family, making excuses to skip dinners, seeming uncomfortable at holiday gatherings. Of course, now I knew why. She was pulling away because you've been terrorizing her for over a year. I snapped. Jesus Christ, Dad, you hired someone to follow her. You know her work schedule, her yoga classes, her coffee orders. You've been making her feel hunted and watched, and then you're surprised she doesn't want to come to Sunday dinner. The surveillance was necessary too. The surveillance is felony stalking. I was shouting now, and I didn't care who heard me. You're a criminal. You've committed multiple felonies against my wife. My father's expression hardened. I've committed myself to saving my son from a marriage that will define the rest of his life in ways he's too young and infatuated to understand. And if she has a nervous breakdown, if she hurts herself because she thinks someone's going to kill her, then she'll leave you, and you'll thank me in 10 years. The coldness in his voice was breathtaking. This wasn't temporary insanity or a moment of poor judgment. This was who my father really was, someone who would systematically destroy an innocent woman's mental health to get what he wanted. It's over, I said, standing up. You're going to stop. Now. No more letters, no more surveillance, no more psychological warfare. My father smiled, and it was the most chilling thing I'd ever seen. Or what, Marcus? You'll report me to the police. With what evidence? Tony Reeves was paid through a legitimate LLC for investigative services. The letters are untraceable. There are no fingerprints, no digital footprints leading back to me. His smile widened. I've been practicing law for 30 years, son. I don't leave evidence. That's when I realized this was far from over. I left my father's office feeling like I'd been physically assaulted. The worst part wasn't just learning that he'd orchestrated Sarah's torment, it was the realization that he was right about the evidence. Marcus Henderson Sr. hadn't built a 30-year legal career by making amateur mistakes. But he'd made one error, underestimating how far I'd go to protect my wife. That evening, I sat Sarah down in our living room and told her everything. About Tony Reeves, about Westfield Holdings, about the conversation with my father. I watched her face cycle through disbelief, horror, rage, and finally a kind of broken resignation that made my chest ache. Your father, she said quietly. Your father has been doing this. Sarah, I'm so sorry. I should have seen it, should have known. 14 months. She was staring at her hands. Marcus, I thought I was losing my mind. I started taking different routes to work. I switched grocery stores. I've been sleeping with a baseball bat under the bed for 3 months. Her voice cracked. Your own father wanted me to feel crazy. I reached for her, but she pulled back. I need some space tonight, she said. I'm going to stay at Janet's. Watching her pack a bag felt like watching my marriage dissolve in real time. This was exactly what my father wanted, Sarah pulling away, our trust eroding, our relationship crumbling under the weight of his manipulation. Don't let him win, I said as she stood in our bedroom doorway. Sarah, please. Don't let him destroy us. She looked at me with eyes that had aged years in a single day. He already has, Marcus. Even if we stay together, how do I sit across from him at Christmas dinner? How do I pretend to be part of a family where the patriarch spent over a year trying to drive me away? After she left, I sat alone in our house, surrounded by the life we built together, and realized my father had been more effective than he'd probably dreamed. Even with the truth exposed, the damage was spreading like poison through everything Sarah and I had. But I wasn't done fighting. The next morning, I called Tony Reeves. I need everything you have on my father's campaign against my wife. Every document, every photo, every communication. I already gave you the important stuff. Tony, he told me there's no evidence that could trace back to him. He's confident he covered his tracks. I paused, choosing my words carefully. But you investigated Sarah for 14 months. You documented everything. There has to be something he missed. Tony was quiet for a long moment. There might be. Can you meet me this afternoon? We met at the same Denny's, but this time Tony brought a laptop and a box of files. Your father was very careful about paper trails, he said, but he made one mistake. He's old school, doesn't trust digital communication, always wanted updates by phone or in person. How is that a mistake? Because I'm not old school. Tony turned his laptop toward me. I recorded every conversation. My heart stopped. What? 47 phone calls over 14 months. Every instruction, every request for additional information, every discussion about escalating pressure on your wife. Tony clicked play on an audio file. This one's from January 15th. My father's voice filled the air. Asterisk, I need you to document her exact route to work. What time she leaves, which streets she takes, where she stops for coffee. I want a detailed timeline. Asterisk. Tony's voice responded. Asterisk, that's pretty invasive, Mr. Henderson. May I ask what this is for? Asterisk. Asterisk, my son made a poor choice in marriage. I'm gathering information that will help him understand the reality of his situation. Asterisk. Jesus, I breathed. It gets worse. Tony skipped to another file, dated October 3rd. My father's voice was colder, more impatient. Asterisk, the financial information isn't enough. I need personal vulnerabilities. Fears, insecurities, traumatic experiences. Things that could be leveraged. Asterisk. Asterisk, leveraged how? Asterisk. Asterisk, that's not your concern. Just find me something I can use. Asterisk. Tony closed the laptop. I've got 47 recordings like that, Marcus. Your father explicitly discussing psychological manipulation, invasion of privacy, and what any reasonable person would interpret as preparation for harassment. Will you testify? In court. Absolutely. But there might be a better way. Tony lit another cigarette. Your father thinks he's untouchable because he's careful and connected. But he's not expecting a public confrontation. What's that big family event coming up? Your mother mentioned it during one of our calls. Their 50th wedding anniversary party. Next Saturday. My mind started racing. 200 guests, including half the judges in the county, his law partners, family friends. People who know him as Marcus Henderson Sr., pillar of the community. Tony smiled grimly. Might be interesting to play some of these recordings for that crowd. The idea hit me like lightning. My father's greatest vulnerability wasn't legal consequences, it was his reputation. He'd built his entire identity around being respected, admired, seen as a man of integrity and principle. How good is the audio quality? Crystal clear. I use professional equipment. Tony's expression grew serious. But Marcus, if you do this, there's no going back. You'll destroy your relationship with your father permanently. I thought about Sarah sleeping at Janet's apartment, about the terror in her eyes when she'd read those letters, about 14 months of systematic psychological torture designed to drive away the woman I loved. He destroyed it first, I said. That evening, Sarah agreed to meet me for dinner at Romano's, the Italian place where we'd had our first date. She looked exhausted, like she hadn't slept at all. I've been thinking, she said before I could speak. Maybe we should consider counseling. Or a trial separation. I don't know how to move forward from this. What if I told you I found a way to make him pay for what he did? Sarah's eyes sharpened. What kind of way? I told her about the recordings, about Tony's offer to testify, about the anniversary party. As I spoke, I watched something change in her expression, the defeated resignation replaced by something harder, more determined. You want to destroy his reputation in front of everyone he cares about. I want justice, I said. And I want to make sure he never tries this with anyone else. Sarah was quiet for a long time, turning her wine glass in slow circles. Finally, she looked up at me. When is this party? Saturday at 7, I said. The Meridian Country Club. Black tie, open bar, and a crowd full of people who think my father walks on water. Sarah nodded slowly. What exactly are you planning to do? Stand up during the toasts and announce that Marcus Henderson Sr. is a stalker. Something like that. I reached across the table and took her hand. Sarah, I know this is insane. But he told me himself, there's no legal evidence that would stick. Tony's recordings might not even be admissible in court because of Pennsylvania's two-party consent laws. The only way to stop him is to hit him where it actually hurts. His reputation. Everything he's built, everything he cares about, depends on people seeing him as ethical and honorable. When his law partners, the judges, his country club friends hear those recordings. I squeezed her hand. He'll be finished. Sarah pulled her hand back. And what happens to us afterward? Your mother will hate me. Your extended family will think I turned you against your father. Every family gathering for the rest of our lives will be poisoned by this. She was right, and I've been trying not to think about it. My mother had spent 3 weeks planning this anniversary party. Aunt Linda had flown in from Phoenix. My father's college roommate was driving down from Boston. The party was supposed to be a celebration of 50 years of marriage, and I was planning to turn it into a public execution. My mother will understand when she hears what he did, I said, though I wasn't sure I believed it. And if the rest of the family can't accept that I protected my wife from a criminal, then maybe we're better off without them. Sarah studied my face for a long moment. You're sure about this? Because once you do this, Marcus, there's no undoing it. Your father will never forgive you. He terrorized you for over a year, I said. He hired people to follow you, document your every move, find ways to hurt you. He told me to my face that he wanted you to think someone was going to harm you. Why should I care if he forgives me? But even as I said it, I felt something twisting in my chest. Because despite everything, part of me still remembered being 8 years old and thinking my father was the smartest, strongest man in the world. Part of me remembered him teaching me to throw a curveball, helping me with my law school applications, telling me he was proud of me at my swearing-in ceremony. That man and the one who'd calmly admitted to orchestrating psychological warfare against my wife couldn't be the same person. Except they were. There's something else, I said reluctantly. Tony told me my father hired someone else when he refused to escalate the pressure. Someone without Tony's ethical boundaries. Sarah's face went pale. What does that mean? I don't know yet. But the letter stopped 3 weeks ago, right after Tony came forward. That might not be a coincidence. You think he called off whoever else he hired? Or told them to lay low until things cooled down? The thought had been keeping me awake at night. Sarah, what if Saturday's party isn't just about revenge? What if it's about preventing whatever he's planning next? She was quiet for so long I thought she might get up and leave. Finally, she spoke. If we do this, if we really do this, I want to be there when you play those recordings. Sarah, you don't have to. Yes, I do. Her voice was steel now, the voice of the woman who'd negotiated million-dollar marketing campaigns and never backed down from a challenge. He spent 14 months trying to break me. I want to look him in the eye when his world comes crashing down. That's when I knew we were really going to do this. The week leading up to the anniversary party felt like preparing for war. Sarah moved back home, but there was a brittleness to our interactions, like we were both afraid that acknowledging the enormity of what we were planning might make us lose our nerve. On Wednesday, Tony called with news that made my blood run cold. I figured out who your father hired after me, he said without preamble. Guy named Carl Briscoe. Real piece of work, lost his PI license in Ohio for harassment, does off-the-books intimidation jobs now. What kind of intimidation? The kind that leaves psychological scars but no physical evidence. Briscoe specializes in making people feel unsafe in ways that can't be traced back to whoever is paying him. Tony's voice was grim. I reached out to a contact who's worked with him. Your father paid Briscoe $15,000 up front with a promise of another 10 when the job was complete. What job? Making your wife disappear. Not physically, Tony added quickly. But Briscoe's good at escalating fear until people run. New identity, new city, completely starting over. Your father essentially hired a professional to drive Sarah into hiding. I felt like I might throw up. When did this start? Payments began March 1st, right after I told your father I wouldn't escalate things. Briscoe's been doing surveillance, waiting for the right moment to make his move. What kind of move? That's what worries me. Briscoe's methods are creative. Break-ins where nothing's stolen but personal items are moved around. Dead flowers left on doorsteps. Photos slipped under car windshields showing the target in vulnerable moments. Tony paused. The goal is to make someone feel like they're never safe, never alone, never free from being watched. Jesus Christ. I thought about Sarah's recent behavior, double-checking locks, jumping at unexpected sounds, that haunted look in her eyes. Tony, what if he's already started? That's why I'm calling. I think Saturday might be your only chance to stop this before it gets worse. Once your father realizes you're onto him, he might tell Briscoe to accelerate the timeline. After I hung up, I found Sarah in our bedroom, staring out the window with an expression I'd never seen before, not fear, but cold, calculating anger. I heard, she said without turning around. Who's Carl Briscoe? I told her everything Tony had shared. As I spoke, I watched her reflection in the window, saw her hands slowly clench into fists. $15,000, she said finally. Your father spent $15,000 to hire someone to terrorize me into disappearing. Sarah. Do you know what I make in a year, Marcus? $68,000. Your father spent more than 20% of my annual salary on destroying my mental health. She turned to face me, and her eyes were blazing. He doesn't just dislike me. He hates me enough to pay professional money to erase me from your life. We're going to stop him. No, Sarah said, her voice deadly quiet. We're going to destroy him. That's when she told me about the guest list she'd found. I've been thinking about Saturday night, she said, walking to her laptop. Your mother sent me the invitation list weeks ago, asking if I recognized any of my work colleagues she should include. I didn't think much of it then, but look at this. She pulled up a spreadsheet with over 200 names. Marcus, do you realize who's going to be at this party? Judge Martinez from the Superior Court. District Attorney Patricia Wells. FBI Regional Director James Morrison, that's Detective Morrison's husband. The mayor, 3 city council members, and the president of the State Bar Association. I stared at the list, understanding dawning slowly. It's not just his social circle. It's every person with power in the local legal system. Your father invited everyone who could potentially investigate him or prosecute him to celebrate his golden anniversary. Sarah's smile was sharp as a blade. He's literally gathering all his protection in one room. Which means when those recordings play, every person with the authority to hold him accountable will hear them simultaneously. No time for him to spin the story, call in favors, or control the narrative. Sarah closed the laptop. Marcus, your father isn't just going to lose his reputation on Saturday night. He's going to lose his immunity. The weight of what we were about to do hit me fully for the first time. This wasn't just family drama anymore. We were about to trigger an avalanche that would bury my father's career, his freedom, and possibly his marriage. Are you sure you can live with this? I asked Sarah. She looked at me with eyes that had been hardened by 14 months of systematic terror. Can you live with letting him get away with it? I couldn't. And that's when I knew there was no turning back. Friday night, less than 24 hours before the anniversary party, everything went sideways. I was in my home office, reviewing the audio files Tony had provided one final time, when Sarah's scream from the kitchen made my blood freeze. I ran downstairs to find her standing by the back door, trembling, holding a manila envelope. It was just sitting on the porch, she whispered. No footprints, no car sounds. It's like it materialized. Inside the envelope were photographs. Professional quality, high resolution, taken with a telephoto lens. Sarah getting dressed this morning through our bedroom window. Sarah in the shower yesterday. Sarah sleeping in our bed Tuesday night. Dozens of them, spanning at least a week, all taken from impossible angles that suggested someone had been inside our house. At the bottom of the stack was a single sheet of paper. You can't hide behind your husband forever. Some problems solve themselves when people disappear. CB. Carl Briscoe had made his move. He's been inside our house, Sarah said, her voice unnaturally calm. Marcus, he's been in our bedroom while we were sleeping. I was already on the phone with Detective Morrison, but she delivered news that made everything worse. I'm sorry, Marcus, but we can't move on this tonight. Carl Briscoe's not in the system, no address, no known associates, probably not even his real name. These photos, while deeply disturbing, don't show him committing a crime we can prove. He broke into our house. The photos could have been taken from neighboring properties with professional equipment. Without clear evidence of breaking and entering, or direct threats of violence, our hands are tied until Monday when we can get a warrant for deeper investigation. After she hung up, Sarah and I stood in our violated kitchen, holding evidence of 14 months of psychological warfare, and realized we were completely alone. No one was coming to help us. No one was going to stop this except us. We could leave town tonight, I said desperately. Drive to your parents in Atlanta, wait for the police to handle this. Sarah looked at me like I'd suggested surrender to an invading army. Your father wins if we run. Briscoe gets paid, we spend the rest of our lives looking over our shoulders, and your father moves on to his next victim. What if something happens tomorrow night? What if Briscoe? Then we make sure everyone in that room knows exactly who's responsible. Sarah's voice was steel wrapped in ice. Marcus, your father hired this man. If Briscoe hurts me, if I disappear, if anything happens to us, those recordings will make your father an accessory to whatever comes next. That's when Tony called with information that changed everything. I found Briscoe's weakness, he said. Guy's got a gambling problem that makes your wife's college poker phase look like church bingo. He owes $63,000 to a loan shark in Atlantic City named Vincent Torino. Payments due Monday, or Briscoe's going to need more than a new identity. How does that help us? Because desperate people make stupid mistakes. I'm betting Briscoe's planning something big for tomorrow night, maybe a final scare that sends Sarah running and gets him that $10,000 completion bonus from your father. Tony paused. But if he's desperate enough, he might try something at the party itself. My blood went cold. The anniversary party. With 200 people. Think about it. Your wife, alone in a bathroom or stepping outside for air. Briscoe grabs her, whispers something about knowing where she lives, maybe shows her a photo of you leaving work. She runs home terrified, maybe doesn't even tell you what happened, just says she can't take it anymore and leaves town. The scenario was horrifyingly plausible. Sarah disappearing from our lives not because of evidence or logic, but because a hired predator had finally broken her spirit in front of everyone we knew. Tony, what if we use this against them? How? What if we let Briscoe make his move, but we're ready for him? The plan was forming in my mind as I spoke. Security cameras, witnesses, evidence that couldn't be denied or explained away. That's insane, Marcus. You're talking about using your wife as bait. He was right. It was insane. But Sarah, who'd been listening to the entire conversation, looked at me with something I hadn't seen in months, hope mixed with fierce determination. Set the trap, she said quietly. I'm done running from your family's hired monsters. The plan we devised was either brilliant or completely insane, possibly both. Saturday afternoon, while Sarah got ready for the anniversary party, I met Tony at a surveillance equipment rental shop on the south side of town. You sure about this? He asked, handing me a wireless audio transmitter no bigger than a shirt button. If Briscoe spots the wire, things could escalate fast. He won't spot it, I said, though my hands were shaking as I clipped the tiny device inside my suit jacket. Guy's overconfident. 14 months of getting away with this has made him sloppy. Tony loaded fresh batteries into 3 microcameras designed to look like decorative pins. These will give us multiple angles if he approaches Sarah. Audio range is about 30 feet, video quality is good enough for court. He paused, studying my face. Marcus, you know there's a chance this backfires completely. Briscoe might not show, or your father might have called him off after those photos last night. Then we play the recordings as planned and hope it's enough. I tested the audio feed on my phone, crystal clear. But something tells me my father wants to watch Sarah break. He'll want Briscoe there to see his handiwork pay off. When I got home, Sarah was standing in front of our bedroom mirror, wearing the black cocktail dress she bought for our 3rd anniversary dinner. She looked stunning and terrified in equal measure. The cameras are hidden in your jewelry, I said, showing her how to activate them. Earrings, bracelet, and necklace. Tony will be monitoring from the parking lot, and Detective Morrison agreed to have a unit on standby despite the jurisdictional complications. Sarah turned to face me, and I saw something in her expression that made my chest tight. Marcus, what if your mother gets caught in the crossfire tonight? She planned this party for months. She invited her college roommates, her book club, people she's known for decades. The guilt I'd been suppressing for a week hit me like a freight train. My mother had no idea her golden anniversary celebration was about to become ground zero for the destruction of everything she'd built with my father. Helen Henderson, who baked cookies for our neighbors and volunteered at 3 different charities, was about to discover that her husband of 50 years was a criminal. She deserves to know who she's married to, I said, but the words felt hollow. Does she? Marcus, your mother is 71 years old. What if finding out your father is capable of this level of cruelty destroys her? I thought about my parents' wedding photo on their mantelpiece, two young people from working-class families who built a life together through decades of shared dreams and mutual support. My father had been different then, softer around the edges, more concerned with building a future than controlling every variable in his environment. When did he become this person? I asked, more to myself than to Sarah. Maybe he always was, and we just never threatened something he wanted badly enough. Sarah fastened the camera-enabled necklace, her hand steady now. Your father didn't develop the capacity for psychological warfare overnight. This took planning, resources, and a complete absence of empathy. She was right, and that realization brought another disturbing thought. If my father could orchestrate 14 months of harassment against Sarah, what else had he done over his 30-year career? How many other people had crossed Marcus Henderson Sr. and found their lives systematically dismantled? We'll find out tonight, Sarah said, reading my expression. Because after those recordings play, people are going to start remembering things. Patterns they ignored, coincidences that weren't really coincidences, wins that came a little too easily. At 6:47 p.m., 13 minutes before the anniversary party officially began, Tony's voice crackled through my earpiece. He's here. Black sedan, Pennsylvania plates, parked at the far end of the lot. Carl Briscoe just walked into the Meridian Country Club like he belongs there. The hunt was about to begin. The Meridian Country Club's grand ballroom had been transformed into something from a fairy tale. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over tables draped in ivory silk, centerpieces of white roses and baby's breath filling the air with subtle perfume. A jazz quartet played softly in the corner while waiters in black ties circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres. It was elegant, tasteful, and completely at odds with the war about to unfold. My parents stood near the entrance, greeting guests like the picture-perfect couple they'd always appeared to be. My mother wore a champagne-colored gown that complemented her silver hair, her face glowing with genuine happiness as she hugged old friends and accepted congratulations. My father, resplendent in his custom tuxedo, played the role of gracious host with the same commanding presence he brought to courtrooms. Watching them together, I felt a stab of something that might have been grief. In 3 hours, this image would be destroyed forever. You okay? Sarah whispered, slipping her arm through mine. She looked radiant in her black dress, the hidden cameras positioned perfectly in her jewelry. No one watching us would guess we were carrying enough surveillance equipment to bring down a federal judge. Tony's voice in my earpiece, Briscoe's inside. Navy suit, gray tie, positioned near the bar with a clear view of the room. He's good, looks like any other guest. I scanned the crowd until I spotted him. Carl Briscoe was younger than I'd expected, maybe 45, with the kind of forgettable face that probably served him well in his line of work. He held a scotch and soda like a prop, his eyes tracking Sarah's movement with predatory focus. There, I murmured to Sarah, nodding toward the bar. Navy suit by the ice sculpture. Sarah's grip tightened on my arm, but her expression remained perfectly composed. He photographed me sleeping, Marcus. That man was in our bedroom. Judge Martinez approached before I could respond, his wife Elena trailing behind with a warm smile. Marcus. Sarah. You both look wonderful. 50 years, can you imagine? Your parents are an inspiration. They certainly are, Sarah replied smoothly, though I caught the slight edge in her voice. We're so grateful for all the love and support from everyone tonight. As the judge moved on, Tony's voice crackled again, movement. Briscoe's heading toward the terrace doors. Sarah, if you're going to draw him out, now's the time. The terrace overlooked the club's golf course, offering privacy and multiple exit routes, exactly what someone like Briscoe would want for an intimidation encounter. Sarah had volunteered to step outside alone at exactly 8:15 p.m., giving him the opportunity he'd been waiting for. It's time, I said quietly. Sarah nodded, then did something that surprised me. She reached up and kissed me softly, right there in front of 200 guests, her hand resting against my chest where the audio transmitter was hidden. I love you, she whispered. Whatever happens out there, remember that this started because your father couldn't stand that you chose me. Sarah. He's about to learn what it costs to underestimate a woman who's tired of being afraid. She walked toward the terrace with the kind of confidence that had first attracted me 5 years ago, shoulders back, head high, moving through the crowd like she owned the room. Several guests nodded and smiled as she passed, completely unaware they were watching someone walk into a carefully orchestrated trap. My father intercepted her halfway across the room. Sarah, my dear, his voice carried clearly over the jazz quartet. You look lovely tonight. I don't believe I've had a chance to properly welcome you. The irony was breathtaking. Marcus Henderson Sr., who had spent 14 months and $30,000 trying to drive his daughter-in-law away, was now playing the role of gracious father-in-law in front of his assembled guests. Thank you, Marcus, Sarah replied, her voice steady. Helen's done such a beautiful job with the party. You must be very proud. 50 years, my father said, his hand resting possessively on Sarah's elbow. It takes real commitment to build something that lasts. Through my earpiece, Tony's voice was urgent, he's moving. Briscoe just stepped outside. Sarah needs to get out there now. But my father wasn't letting go of her arm. Marcus tells me you've been under some stress lately, my father continued, his grip on Sarah's arm tightening slightly. Anonymous letters, was it? How terrifying that must have been. The casual cruelty in his voice made my blood freeze. He was taunting her, right here in front of everyone, confident that she'd never dare make a scene at his anniversary party. Sarah's smile never wavered. Oh, that's all resolved now. We discovered who was behind it. My father's expression didn't change, but I caught the slight tightening around his eyes. Really? How fortunate. I do hope they catch the perpetrator. They will, Sarah said softly. Tonight, actually. Tony's voice crackled urgently in my ear. Marcus, we've got a problem. Briscoe's not alone out there. Black SUV just pulled up, 2 more men, professional grade. This isn't intimidation anymore. My heart hammered against my ribs. The plan was falling apart. Sarah was supposed to face one desperate gambler, not a team of professionals. And my father still had his hand on her arm, keeping her from the terrace where backup was waiting. Dad, I said, approaching them with forced casualness, Mom's looking for you. Something about the cake ceremony. In a moment, son. Sarah and I were just discussing her recent troubles. His fingers hadn't moved from her elbow. You know, in my experience, people who receive anonymous threats usually know more about their origins than they let on. Sarah tilted her head, still smiling. What an interesting perspective. Are you speaking from professional experience? The challenge in her voice was subtle but unmistakable. My father's eyes sharpened, recognizing the shift in dynamics. 30 years of criminal law teaches you that victims often have complicated relationships with the truth, he said. And 30 years of marriage should teach you that some secrets destroy families. My mother's voice cut through the tension like a blade. We all turned to find Helen Henderson standing behind us, her face pale but composed. In her hand was a manila folder I recognized with sickening certainty, Tony's evidence file. Mom. I managed. Your friend Mr. Reeves called the house an hour ago, she said quietly, her eyes never leaving my father's face. He was concerned about Sarah's safety tonight. He thought I should know what my husband has been doing with our money. My father released Sarah's arm like it had caught fire. Helen, we should discuss this privately. 14 months, Marcus. My mother's voice carried clearly over the jazz quartet, and nearby conversations began to falter. You spent 14 months terrorizing our daughter-in-law, and you paid for it with money from our joint account. The folder in her hands contained bank statements, Tony's reports, and transcripts of the recorded phone calls. Everything we planned to reveal tonight, now in the hands of the one person who could destroy my father more completely than any public confrontation. Mrs. Henderson, Sarah said gently, you don't have to do this here. Yes, I do. My mother opened the folder, her hands steady despite the tremor in her voice. Because if I don't, more innocent people will suffer. Through my earpiece, Tony was practically shouting, the SUV team is moving toward the building. Multiple weapons visible. This isn't harassment anymore, someone's trying to clean up loose ends. My father's face had gone ashen as he realized the scope of his exposure. Not just his son and daughter-in-law, but his wife of 50 years, holding evidence that could end his career and freedom. Helen, you don't understand the complexities. I understand that you hired criminals to stalk a 26-year-old woman because she married our son. My mother's voice rose slightly, drawing more attention from nearby guests. I understand that you've committed felonies using our family's resources. Judge Martinez had stopped mid-conversation, his judicial instincts picking up on the shift in atmosphere. District Attorney Wells was frowning in our direction, her prosecutor's antenna clearly sensing trouble. Tony's voice was desperate now, Marcus, get everyone out of there. This is about to become a crime scene. The moment my mother opened that folder in the middle of the anniversary party, everything accelerated beyond our control. Judge Martinez was now openly staring, District Attorney Wells had set down her champagne and was moving closer, and my father looked like a man watching his entire world collapse in real time. Helen, please, my father said, his lawyer's composure finally cracking. This is neither the time nor the place. When is the right time to discuss $37,000 in payments to criminals, Marcus? When is the right place to address the fact that my husband hired someone to photograph our daughter-in-law in the shower? The words hit the crowd like a physical blow. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. The jazz quartet played on, oblivious, creating a surreal soundtrack to my family's public destruction. Tony's voice screamed through my earpiece, they're inside. 3 armed men just entered through the kitchen. Get Sarah out of there now. But before I could move, Carl Briscoe appeared from the terrace doors, no longer bothering to blend in with the other guests. His forgettable face was cold, professional, and his right hand rested inside his navy suit jacket in a way that made my blood freeze. Mrs. Henderson, he called out, his voice cutting through the shocked murmur of 200 guests. I think you have something that belongs to my employer. My mother turned toward Briscoe, still holding the evidence folder, and I realized she had no idea who he was or what he represented. To her, he was just another guest interrupting a family crisis. I'm sorry, but you'll have to excuse us, she said with the polite firmness of someone accustomed to managing social situations. We're having a private family discussion. Briscoe stepped closer, and his hand moved further inside his jacket. That folder contains confidential materials. I'm going to need you to hand it over. That's when Detective Morrison's husband, FBI Regional Director James Morrison, materialized beside Briscoe like he'd been waiting for exactly this moment. Carl Briscoe, if that's even your real name, Morrison said conversationally, his own hand positioned with professional readiness. You're under federal surveillance for interstate harassment and conspiracy charges. I'd recommend keeping your hands where everyone can see them. The ballroom had gone completely silent now except for the jazz quartet, who finally seemed to notice something was wrong and trailed off mid-song. 200 guests stood frozen, champagne glasses halfway to their lips, watching a scene that belonged in a crime thriller rather than a golden anniversary celebration. This is fascinating, Judge Martinez said, stepping forward with the judicial authority he'd wielded for 23 years. Mr. Henderson, perhaps you'd like to explain why an armed criminal is claiming ownership of evidence your wife says documents your illegal activities. My father looked around the room, at his law partners, his judicial colleagues, the mayor, the city council members, every person whose respect and cooperation had built his career, and I saw the exact moment he realized there was no way out. The situation is more complex than it appears, he said, falling back on lawyer speak even as his world burned around him. Sarah, who had been silent through this entire nightmare, finally spoke. Actually, it's quite simple. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small digital recorder. Mr. Henderson hired Mr. Briscoe to terrorize me into leaving his son. We have 14 months of evidence, including recorded conversations where Mr. Henderson explicitly discusses psychological torture methods. She pressed play, and my father's voice filled the elegant ballroom. I need personal vulnerabilities. Fears, insecurities, traumatic experiences. Things that could be leveraged. District Attorney Patricia Wells stepped forward, her expression shifting from confusion to prosecutorial focus. Marcus Henderson, you have the right to remain silent. The Miranda rights being read to my father in front of 200 of the most influential people in the city should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like watching a nuclear bomb detonate in slow motion. You have the right to an attorney, District Attorney Wells continued, her voice carrying clearly across the silent ballroom. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be provided for you. My father stood perfectly still, his hands at his sides, that commanding presence finally stripped away to reveal something smaller and more desperate underneath. But his eyes weren't on Wells or the FBI agents now flanking him. They were fixed on my mother, who still clutched the evidence folder like a shield. Helen, he said quietly, his voice barely audible over the ambient noise of 200 people trying not to breathe too loudly. 50 years. Don't let it end like this. My mother looked at him with an expression I'd never seen before, not anger, not disappointment, but a kind of profound grief that made my chest ache. You ended at the moment you decided terrorizing our family was acceptable, she replied. 50 years, Marcus. And I never knew you at all. That's when Tony's voice crackled urgently through my earpiece. 2 more vehicles just pulled up outside. This isn't over, someone's trying to contain the situation. FBI Director Morrison's head tilted slightly, and I realized he was receiving similar information through his own communications. His expression darkened as he spoke quietly into his wrist mic. Lock down the building. No one in or out until we sort this. Judge Martinez stepped forward, his judicial authority cutting through the chaos. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm declaring this a crime scene under federal jurisdiction. Everyone please remain calm and stay where you are. But calm was the last thing anyone felt. I could see the ripple effects spreading through the crowd, whispered conversations, cell phones appearing despite the lockdown order, the dawning realization that they'd all witnessed something that would make headlines across the state. Sarah moved closer to me, her hand finding mine with surprising steadiness. The cameras caught everything, she whispered. Every word, every admission. Through the crowd, I spotted my father's law partners huddled together near the band platform. Senior partner David Pike looked like he was having a heart attack, while junior partner Rebecca Santos was furiously typing on her phone, probably already crafting damage control strategies for the firm. This is going to destroy Henderson, Pike and Associates, I murmured to Sarah. It should, she replied without hesitation. How many other clients did your father help using methods like this? How many cases did they win because Marcus Henderson Sr. was willing to cross lines his opponents wouldn't? The thought hadn't occurred to me, but now it seemed obvious. A man who would spend $37,000 and hire multiple criminals to break up his son's marriage wouldn't hesitate to use similar tactics for paying clients. FBI Director Morrison approached us, his expression professionally neutral. Mr. and Mrs. Henderson, we're going to need detailed statements from both of you. The recordings you mentioned, we'll need those as evidence. Tony has everything, I said, then caught myself using his first name in front of a federal law enforcement official. Thomas Reeves, the private investigator. He's been cooperating fully. Morrison nodded. We've been building a case against your father for 3 weeks, ever since Mr. Reeves came forward. Tonight was supposed to be a controlled arrest, but... He glanced around the ballroom. Your family's decision to confront him publicly has complicated things significantly. Complicated how? Sarah asked. Morrison's expression grew grim. Because now everyone who might have information about your father's other activities knows we're investigating. Evidence has a way of disappearing when people get nervous. As if summoned by his words, my father's voice cut through the crowd with startling clarity. I invoke my right to counsel and refuse to answer any questions without my attorney present. Even under arrest, even with his reputation in ruins, Marcus Henderson Sr. was still thinking like a lawyer. But Sarah stepped forward with a smile that could have cut glass. That's fine, she called out, her voice carrying easily across the silent ballroom. We have 14 months of recorded conversations where you already answered every question that matters. 6 months later, I stood in the visiting room of Federal Correctional Institution McKean, looking at my father through reinforced glass. He'd aged a decade and half a year, his silver hair had gone completely white, and the commanding presence that had defined him for 30 years was gone. The appeals court upheld your conviction, I said, settling into the uncomfortable plastic chair. 18 months for conspiracy, stalking, and witness intimidation. Your lawyer says you'll serve at least 14. My father nodded, his hands folded on the metal table between us. Henderson, Pike and Associates dissolved last month, he said quietly. 30 years of work, gone. Your mother filed for divorce on Tuesday. I know. I helped her find an attorney. His laugh was bitter, hollow. Of course you did. The silence stretched between us until he finally looked up. Was it worth it, Marcus? Destroying your family to protect a marriage that's probably doomed anyway. 6 months ago, that question might have shattered me. Now it just made me tired. Sarah's pregnant, I said. Due in December. We're naming her Helen, after Mom. For the first time since I'd arrived, my father's composed mask slipped completely. His eyes filled with tears he'd probably been holding back since his arrest at the anniversary party that had become legend in our city's legal circles. A granddaughter, he whispered. A granddaughter you'll never meet, I replied. Because Sarah and I decided that someone capable of hiring Carl Briscoe to terrorize a pregnant woman isn't someone we want around our children. The name Carl Briscoe still made my stomach clench. He'd been sentenced to 42 months for his role in the conspiracy, but not before revealing that my father had been his client for other projects over the years. 3 other families had come forward with stories of mysterious harassment campaigns that had destroyed marriages, driven people from town, or forced them to abandon legal cases against my father's clients. The FBI found records going back 12 years, I continued. Westfield Holdings paid for a lot more than just Sarah's surveillance. Judge Martinez called it the most extensive abuse of legal authority he'd ever seen. My father's hands trembled slightly. I was protecting you. You were controlling me. There's a difference. I stood to leave, then paused at the door. Mom's selling the house on Elm Street. She bought a condo near Sarah and me. Says she wants to be close when the baby comes. And you? His voice was barely audible. Will I ever see you again? I thought about the man who taught me to throw a curveball, who'd helped me study for the bar exam, who'd once been the person I respected most in the world. Then I thought about Sarah, 7 months pregnant, finally sleeping peacefully at night because the man who terrorized her was locked away. Every action has consequences, Dad. You taught me that. I walked out without looking back. 2 weeks later, Sarah and I attended the ceremony where Detective Morrison received a commendation for her work on what the media had dubbed the anniversary conspiracy. She'd used our case to launch a broader investigation into corruption in the city's legal system, resulting in 17 indictments and a complete restructuring of how private investigators were licensed and monitored. Your father's downfall probably saved a dozen other families from going through what you did, Detective Morrison told us afterward. That has to count for something. It did. But as I felt our daughter kick against Sarah's belly that night, I realized the real victory wasn't my father's imprisonment or the justice system working properly. The real victory was that Sarah Martinez Henderson was no longer afraid. And that was worth everything.